kind of like a stream of consciousness. I just want to quickly share with you guys something I discovered last week. Happy New Year, by the way. During the process of working on the Fear Theory, the children's book, which started back in like 2019, but the main process of putting it together and organizing everything was very difficult. Very difficult in terms of organizing, planning. There's days when I go into the office that I was renting and I'd want to work. I'd want to like come in. I had all these plans to do this work, and sometimes I just couldn't do it. Like it was like the analogy I like to use with my therapist, the idea of like turning your key in your car to turn it on, and it goes like that's what it would feel like, and it would be like a couple times trying to rev or turn over the engine, and then it goes. Just imagine doing that for 45 minutes, and then it turns on, right? And the thing was, sometimes it'd be 45 minutes, sometimes it'd be 15 minutes, sometimes I go straight to my car and it turns on, right? Sometimes I show up at the office and I'm like right in work mode. But when I look back at my journey, self-discovery, right? I've noticed that trouble focusing and paying attention all the way back into like my childhood, like losing focus in class, and this is stuff I talk about in a lot of the workshops that I do. I'll walk you guys through the presentation in another video, but that's something I talk about. Like I was always in class doodling, just kind of like spacing out, but like hyper focused on just like the ideas that I had, and sketching and drawing in class and all that kind of stuff. I say all that to say this, like last week I found out that I have ADHD, right? I had an inclination throughout the process of working on the book, because like I said, it was very difficult for me to focus, and a lot of the organizational stuff was just kind of like, man, I know better than this. Like, why am I struggling to do some of the most simplest tasks? This is like something I'm putting together, like just very disorganized, like files, Photoshop files all over this drive, and it just like it was very like chaotic, but I managed to get it done. And when I was speaking to the psychiatrist, I don't even know what he was actually, forgive me, but when I was speaking to the practitioner, he basically, I did a bunch of tests or whatnot, but we started talking about like my childhood and some of the things I dealt with and struggled with in school and whatnot. But it really validated what I was trying to uncover and trying to discover all the way back when I was like 15 in high school, right? Because that back then I started to realize there was depression. And I think what I've realized over the last couple of years, that the depression wasn't something that, I think of the analogy of like rock climbing, right? You don't want to hold on to depression for too long, because you end up straining the rest of your arm and have the inability to reach for the next ledge, right? So depression for me, I never wanted to hold it as a label and put it on my chest. And the thing was, it was the only thing that I can use as a way to describe what I was going through, but not as a label, something I was going through. But I think something I've been kind of like thinking about and really taking in and letting it sink in is the idea that the depression was just a symptom of the ADHD, right? When I look back at some of the things some of my teachers said in like middle school, for example, about me doodling in class, I was bored. I was bored, and I wish, looking back, I wished my teacher took it as an opportunity to engage me in another way. But then again, if you're not passionate about your job, and I don't think she really was. I think she just a very negative energy I used to get from her, and that's something I remember very particularly. It's a very like dark and like clearly she was depressed, because that was the energy that I got from her. Just a very low, dark energy. Right, but if you're in that situation and you're not motivated, and you're not going to see those steps as opportunities to engage your students, right? So I don't blame her for that, right? But I think looking back, it wasn't that I just find it fascinating that the depression stemmed from me not applying myself, right? Depression wasn't the fact that like I hated my life, I don't want to live. There was a sense of hopelessness, but only because I wasn't able to achieve the things I wanted to do, or the things that I wanted to do and wanted to achieve took a lot of effort, extra effort. So what I did, realizing that, okay, this depression thing that I'm dealing with, right? I have to tackle it like this. I need to face the fear and just do it, right? So I went about it saying to myself, and I said this to myself in like all of my journals, and I said this to myself like regularly once I started figuring out that's something I was dealing with, that I do not want to let anything in my life stop me, and I do not ever want to let myself say that depression is the reason as to why I can't do this. I can't model because I'm depressed. I can't start a t-shirt line because I'm depressed. I never want to use it as an excuse, because with the years that I've been working in the hospitality industry as a server, bartender, in my 20s, the amount of people that I've met from different walks of life, from all ages, that tell me about regret is something that really stuck with me. And that wasn't something I wanted to do, and something I wanted to hang on to and look back and be like, man, I wish I did that. It just like, it really breaks my heart. But what I did was I was challenging the depression by doing little things that I needed to, doing little missions that allow me to succeed and feel good and build my self-esteem up, right? And I did those in extreme ways. And that's why it is all about like challenging the fear too, right? I went skydiving and jumped out of a plane 3 times, right? The first time I did it was the most amazing feeling in the world, right? It eradicated my depression or depressive symptoms, like the feelings. It eradicated it, right? Because I set out to do something and I accomplished it, right? And it was something that a lot of people, prior to me doing it, a lot of people were terrified of doing, right? When I went camping, for example, and I talk about that in some of my other videos, when I went camping, solo camping in the middle of the woods by myself, right? Coming back from that space allowed me the intentionality to declutter my mind and connect with myself and challenge those fears. And in accomplishing that, I raised my self-esteem up. Depressive symptoms, while I was there and even after I got back, were gone, right? When I thought I suffered from like a body dysmorphic disorder, when I was working out like 5 times a week and I was extra hard on myself, and I decided, you know what, I've never been one to put myself in the spotlight. I'm gonna try modeling, and I did that, right? But it wasn't about like the validation from other people. It's about the validation internally. That's the thing that, like, when I talk to people about this stuff, a lot of people don't get it. They automatically see doing something like that as seeking validation from other people. But that's the way they're looking at it. If they were to do something like that, the validation from other people would be the thing that's going to drive them. That's what they're going to hold on to, similar to the rock climbing thing, right? But what I realized, especially with camping and skydiving and all of this stuff, was like a lot of people just projecting their insecurities on me. And I think when people project their insecurities onto me and project their false sense of belief in themselves and all that crap, that gets in the way of me wanting to accomplish something, which is the ADHD. I'm hyper-focusing on that, right? I'm hyper-focusing on wanting to accomplish this thing, or just do it for the sake of accomplishing it, right? So I found my own weird way over the last couple of years to deal with what I now realize is the attention deficit disorder, right? By hyper-focusing on challenging fear and stepping into it, right? If I can't focus on all these other things, how can I focus on things? Because the thing with fear is all-encompassing. It doesn't just captivate your attention and your mind. It captivates your body. Your body feels anxiety. Your body feels the visceral feeling of fear. And I think that's what locked me in my body and allowed me to kind of zone in on that, like that goal or that mission or that hurdle to overcome, was stepping into that. So in a weird way, over the last couple of years, not knowing that I had ADHD, just focusing on the depression, I sought out to challenge myself, right? By challenging my fears, like extreme fears, a lot of time, even sober karaoke, like doing these things that like socially people were like, the average person would be like, I'm not gonna do that, that's weird, that's this, is that, so far out there. But challenging those fears, right, allowed me to hyper focus on that and realize that, okay, the hyper focusing is allowing me to intentionally block out all the nonsense and other people's opinions and ideas that come with that, right? But when I look back at all of that, even thinking about this right now, that's what So Indifferent is. So Indifferent was me being okay. I don't want to swear. I'm really trying really hard not to get too passionate about this. But So Indifferent was my way of telling everybody to piss off. I'm going to do this because I want to do it. I want to see these kids wearing t-shirts, so I'm going to do a t-shirt thing. I'm going to just make a t-shirt line. I want to learn how to play bass because I want to be on a stage one day. I'm going to do that. That's my goal. And what I realized in setting these goals, it took me on a journey, right? I think a lot of time, and it's funny, the idea of when someone's like, oh, I went to Cuba, or I went to St. Vincent, or I went to Barbados, I went to these extreme, these very beautiful, lavish resorts. Did you go outside the resort into like the villages and the towns and meet the people? No. Then you didn't really experience the island. You experienced something that was curated, right? And don't get me wrong, I personally don't like resorts. I've never been. Maybe that's something I'm missing out on. But if I'm going to travel somewhere, I want to go in, right? That's all about the journey for me. And I think it's cutting myself off from that and going up to the welcome to St. Vincent sign and being like, okay, time to go back home. It's like, no, I'm missing out on the opportunity to touch the grass. I'm missing out on the opportunity to go beyond the signpost, right? So when I think about So Indifferent, I think about depression, and I think about the fact that I have ADHD. I essentially went within myself, created a space under So Indifferent within myself that allowed me to exercise that curiosity for life and then set goals based on those fears and insecurities and use those as a catalyst to launch me to do the things that I set out to do. Right? That's why I'm such an advocate for self-discovery, because it's a lifelong journey. And the one thing I'll say before I end this, it's one of those things where once you go on that journey, you're not going to go back home. Because for me to say that I want to go back home is to say that I want to be where I was at 15 before I started asking those questions. And I didn't like where I was back then because I always knew there was more. Right? And I told myself, hold on till 35, everything will make sense. And lo and behold, even before I turned 35, everything started to make sense. I just wanted to share that with you. I think ADHD for me has been a superpower. Same with depression, and same with anxiety. I think all those things have allowed me to grow into the man that I am today and allowed me to continue to do the work that I'm doing today. So for anybody that's dealing with ADHD or depression or anxiety and they feel like less than, they feel invisible, they feel small, they feel worthless, I've been there, I've gone through that. But you need to continue your self-discovery journey. There's so much more depth to you that meets the eye. And when you realize that a lot of the time, when you're thinking about this stuff or you're listening to other people's opinions and people are sharing their perspectives, and you got to remember the importance of discernment. Not everybody that has advice is good advice, and not all advice is good advice, right? And what works for that person might not work for me, or what worked for me might not work for you. I don't recommend anybody and everybody go skydiving. I don't recommend everybody go solo camping by yourself. I don't recommend that for anybody. If it calls you, then do it. But you have to find what works for you. I found that for me, I need to challenge myself in extreme ways in order to build my self-esteem up, right? And it might not make sense back then that, well, why am I going to do this? Isn't that just stupid? I'm not going to see any return on it. Sometimes it's more about long-term gratification, because if I didn't go on that journey, if I didn't make those decisions back then, there's no way I would have made this children's book series. Talking about the very thing, fear, right? It's in big bold letters on my book, the fear theory. talking about the very thing that holds a lot of people back. And it's all encompassing because despite the ADHD, despite the anxiety, despite all of that, fear is always at the center of it. Even fear of getting diagnosed with it, fear of having it, right? Fear of what people might think, fear of being seen, all of this stuff. So I just encourage you to go and continue to do things that allow you to discover the depths of yourself. Thank you for listening.